Shalom. This video is proof that graven images are today's humanoid or animal robots. Robots were invented in ancient times. In ancient times, their graven images, some of them, did move. The reason for the movement was to make the people believe that they were alive. What do you think they're going to do in this generation? People are not as stupid. I don't want to say stupid. People might not be as simple as they used to be. People are not worshiping the graven images like they used to. But what about humanoid robots? This video is a warning video to humanity, but especially to Yah's people who want to stay clean and undefiled when these robots become for sale, and they're coming for sale very soon. You need to understand that dolls are idols. Stuffed animals are made to look real. If you give your child a doll, they are going to love this doll. They are going to animate this doll. And I'm going to talk more about this in the video. But during this brief explanation of the video content, I want you to take a look at the modern machines which are going to be available for sale. They are graven images with advancements to move like humans and animals. You need to understand that this is very important for them to do this, because robots with human features and abilities, or animal features and abilities, are easily relatable to mankind. Mankind becomes confused because they have natural feelings for living creatures. They have empathy and love for living creatures. It's normal, but it's not normal when for man to be in love or have empathy for an object that doesn't fear, that doesn't have real feelings, that doesn't feel pain. So it is no surprise that the goal for robotics is to make a machine move, talk, and think like a human. They have made robots to even replace dogs, just as the car replaced the horse, and now our man's best friend is going to be replaced. At least that's their plan, and most people are going to be real excited about these robotic dogs, as they will with robotic humans. Many things are going to go. Our jobs are going to go. This video is going to review that. Why do they desire so greatly to do this? This is the question that I'm going to answer in this video, but it's quite sinister. What they're doing. They're sick. The people who are making these robots, they have no idea, or they do actually. That's why I'm making the video, because they're going to tell you that they know what's going on, and they still don't have the common sense to not do it, but they're doing it. So I just want to show you proof in this video that in ancient times there were gods that were made like a human or an animal, and they were robotic. Okay, they had attributes like a human, so humans could identify them. If you notice, graven images aren't made with something unrelatable. They're not going to call a god, a fake god, something that you can't relate to. They need you to relate to this inanimate object before they can get you to worship it. Many statues are graven images. Matter of fact, all statues are graven images. That's what it is. It's a graven image. So please watch this video for proof of the existence of ancient robots, and to learn about the transhuman agenda, which is a half human, half animal agenda, and also half human, half robot agenda. They're basically going to defile mankind, just like they did in the days of Noah. So we are living in those times, and if you mock the introduction of this video, you're not going to find out how to keep yourself from what's going to happen, the inevitable. But it's all according to prophecy. Shalom.
Hundreds and even thousands of years ago, full-size human replicants, animals that moved by themselves, sophisticated multi-action robotic chronometers over 50 feet high. Now, new evidence suggests that ancient androids may have been more reality than myth. The most imposing legacies of the ancient world still stand today. But temples, palaces, and tombs of stone do not tell the full story of life hundreds and thousands of years ago. If we look deeper beneath the ruins, we find a world of extraordinary automated machines.
Although the ancients lacked electronics and computers, some of their automata were really surprisingly sophisticated and incorporated concepts like feedback control and programming.
We are discovering that the ability to create programmable gadgets has been around for 2 millennia. There existed automated devices that were centuries ahead of their time. And many of the breakthrough innovations gave birth to the science of robotics and to the technologies we still use in automated machines today.
A lot of people think that robotics was invented at the beginning of the 20th century. But there were proto-robots. There were a lot of proto-robots around throughout the centuries for 2,000 years, and without those we wouldn't have any modern robots.
The human imagination has always dreamed of a future where we might interact with life-size human replicants. But unbelievably, this might not be a dream. Could it have happened hundreds of years ago? Heron was truly a giant in the field of early advances in robotics and automated machines. But he was standing on the shoulders of a giant himself, Phelan of Byzantium. Phelan is responsible for setting in motion many of the ideas used by Heron and inventors throughout history, right up till the present day. Like many of today's inventors, Phelan was called upon to create automatic machines that would make his benefactors money. Religion played an intrinsic part in life in ancient Alexandria, and it was important that the worshippers be pure before entering the temples where they believed their gods actually lived. How could the worshippers ensure there would be a ready supply of soap and water at the temple to purify themselves? And could the priests capitalize on this demand to gain revenue for their holy places?
This device is called Phelan's automatic soap dispensing machine, and it works like this. On the side of the machine is a coin slot here, which would have collected money from worshippers visiting the temple.
The coin lands in a pan on one end of a lever. The weight causes this end to go down. The other end of the lever pulls upwards and releases a valve that allows water to flow.
So when a coin was placed in there, a supply of water would be turned on. And as the vessel filled up, the weight of the vessel would act on a counterbalance shaft.
The weight of the full pot turns wheels that are attached to strings. The strings pull open the doors to the machine and at the same time cause a hand to lower,
which presents the worshipper with a ball of soap, or in this case, pumice.
The hand returns to the interior of the machine and is automatically reloaded with soap.
After a few seconds, the vessel reaches its siphon point and it dumps the water in a fairly continuous stream for several seconds down through the device, through the pipe in the lion's mouth, thus allowing the worshipper to actually wash their hands using the pumice ball. These examples of technology designed by Phelan are some of the very earliest machines that we could truly call automatic. For a device which is something like 2,250 years old, this is just mind-blowing. It's a staggering achievement.
The exact same principles of this machine still drive many of our machines today, nearly 2,500 years later.
One could argue that this device was the forerunner of the modern soap dispensers that you find in washrooms.
Phelan, Heron, and others in the Alexandrian school created the world's prototype robots and automated machines. Machines that self-regulate. Machines that always do the same thing time after time. And there was a special need for exactly this capability in ancient China. The ancient Chinese were impressive long-range traders, map makers, and adventurers. But it was important to them that they always knew which was home, and especially in which direction lay the fabulous holy city and capital of their empire, Beijing. How could the ancient Chinese inventors solve the problem of always being sure in which direction lay their capital? The answer lay in a high-tech chariot mounted with a programmable direction finder.
At all times, the figure which was mounted on top of the chariot would point to the capital city.
Ludo Verheyen of MTE Studios has reconstructed a full-scale model of this fascinating machine.
Yeah, this project was indeed quite a challenge. It was the first time that these features have been reconstructed ever, and the mechanics involved was really a challenge.
As Ludo rotates the device, we can see that the statue on the top always points the same way, whichever way the chariot turns. But how does it work?
It's a highly sophisticated geared mechanism which is very, very similar to the device that we find in almost every modern car, which we would now call a differential gear. The gearbox effectively is measuring the speed between two wheels. As one wheel moves faster than the other, as it does when turning a corner, it alters the position of the figure which is mounted above the chariot.
When the cart turns to the right-hand wheel turns a cog inside the machine. This turns the central gear which rotates the figure. Because the right-hand gear has rotated more than the left, the figure is turned more toward the left. So as the cart turns right, the figure turns left to compensate. The result is, it seems that the pointing statue has not turned at all and always points in the same direction.
No matter where the chariot moves, how it twists and turns, the figure should always remain pointing in the same direction.
All the Chinese travelers would have to do is orientate the statue on departure, and it would remain pointing in that direction for the entire duration of the journey.
To all intents and purposes, I think it would be fair to claim that this is a robotic device. It was an incredibly important invention and has had a huge impact on the technology of the last 100 years in particular.
But there is intriguing evidence that the ancients designed machines that could perform several actions all at the same time. Could the world's first supercomputer have been designed almost 1,000 years ago? Leading the field was an inventor who can claim to be called the godfather of robotics, Heron of Alexandria.
He's the big name, and it's for one simple reason. 5 of his books are still in existence.
Heron's books are evidence of an Alexandrian society that was so advanced they became the center of learning and technological achievement throughout the known world.
Some of these early peoples were far more sophisticated than we give them credit for. They were at least as intelligent as we are now. Their mastery of philosophy, of astronomy, of what we would now call physics, was absolutely immense. So it would be dangerous for us to underestimate their capacity.
But is there evidence that the ancients actually devised fully automated devices? The answer is yes. Recently, new discoveries dating back thousands of years now tell us that the ancients did in fact have and use advanced automated machines. Worshippers visited temples with self-opening automatic doors. Audiences flocked to automated puppet theaters. And ancient texts even tell of chariots flying through massive temples, seemingly on their own. By the 3rd century BC, the city had become an ancient technopark, where sophisticated machines played a part of everyday life. And at the center of it all was Heron. He was renowned for testing and demonstrating his theories and devices to produce wonder and entertainment.
He describes many, many different inventions that were designed to surprise and give the impression of magic.
And don't forget, he was a showman. His work was to display and make people really excited about engines.
Richard Windley is an historical model maker and specialist in recreating Heron's amazing devices.
We're very fortunate in having most of the translations of Heron's treatise on pneumatics, in which he talks about air pressures, water pressures, the interaction of the two. And in his treatise, he describes a number of objects which are based around these principles. This piece is number 66, and he describes it as a vessel for dispensing a measured quantity of liquid, wine usually being the favourite.
But how does the jug measure exactly how much wine to release?
Inside the vessel is a valve which is operated by this mechanism at the top, which in turn goes down to this lever which counterbalances the cup at the front.
When Richard removes the weight, the wine starts to pour. When the cup is nearly full, the balance tips and the flow of wine stops as if by magic. But how did the dispenser work?
The heart of the system is a little valve which sits inside the bottom of the vessel. The Greeks seem to favour these little conical-shaped gravity valves because they opened and closed very quickly. The little conical weight drops into the orifice of the valve when the cup is heavy enough, and this cuts off the flow of wine from the vessel to the cup.
When the weight is removed, the bar drops under gravity. This causes the connecting rod to drop, which lifts the valve, and the fluid can flow through the conical valve and out of the jug.
Now, because the cup is balanced by the weight at the rear, as soon as it reaches a predetermined point, dictated by that weight there, the cup will then drop. That arm rises, the valve drops, cuts off the flow of liquid, and so that cycle of the process is finished. It's an absolutely fascinating design, and it's probably the first real genesis of control systems that we're aware of.
But what if a guest became carried away with the ingenuity of this technological achievement, or its wine contents? For people like these, Heron was a prankster.
This little invention proves that the ancient Greeks had both a sense of humour and a sense of mischief. It's called a greedy cup, and a host would present this to one of his guests who had perhaps a reputation for enjoying his cups. And what would happen is that when the chalice or calyx was partially filled with wine, it would just act as a normal cup. As soon as the guest said, no, fill it up, top up the cup, the little siphon in the centre of the cup suddenly starts to operate, and the entire contents of the cup are dumped onto the person's lap, all over the clothes of the unsuspecting guest.
Hidden within the center column of the cup is a pipe with a bend. There is an opening to this pipe at the bottom of the cup. When the liquid in the cup reaches a level higher than the bend, air pressure forces the liquid through the tube, up and around and out of the cup. The liquid continues to flow even as the level drops below the bend because of a difference in air pressure between this height and the bottom of the tube. The liquid continues to run down the tube and all over the unsuspecting guest.
An ancient practical joke.
But Heron was interested in much more than party tricks. He utilized a deceptively simple invention to fantastic effect. It is simply called the cam. As the disc rotates, the rod moves up and down. It may sound simple, but this ingenious and deceptively simple device translates circular motion into lateral motion. This allows a wheel to produce a push or a pull. Also, if used backwards, a push or a pull can be converted into circular motion. This is how the piston's movement is converted to circular movement in the camshaft of an engine. This exact principle is used in all engines, right up till the modern day. For all of Heron's brilliance, he had yet to design his masterpiece, an entire theater whose actors were robots. As the Codex Atlanticus, contained within its pages are sketches and virtual blueprints for hundreds of Leonardo's inventions. Hidden among the pages of this text is an extraordinary find, one that challenges the history books. The pages describe in intriguing detail the inner workings of a fully automated android, made to look like a knight.
So now what it's left us with is having to be detectives. It's a bit like an archaeological dig. We have to go in, we have to look at the drawings over and over and over again.
Florence, Italy is where Leonardo did much of his work. Alessandro Romanelli is a curator at the Leonardo Museum in the city. It is here that robotics historians have actually reconstructed Leonardo's robot knight. based on sketches made by Leonardo himself 500 years ago.
Leonardo dedicated himself to the project of an automaton, which is a humanoid machine.
Leonardo's android was designed based on an advanced knowledge of biomechanics.
And that's the science of how our bodies move. And so he was all the time thinking about, how could I make a machine that would be like a person?
Leonardo's robot was designed to replicate human movement through metal. Muscles, tendons, and ligaments were all first studied meticulously before their function was transformed into the robot's design.
Leonardo thought of the human body as a wonderful, perfect machine, and he tried to create a mechanical model that could reproduce the effect of human movements.
Cogs in the chest of the robot were attached to axles that were wound with rope. As the key cogs rotated, the rope became unwound or wound tighter. The rope was attached to the limbs, and as the rope was pulled or released, the limb moved.
It worked through the effect of tightening and loosening the ropes to simulate the traction and straining of limbs.
Beneath the knight's armor, we can see the gears and ropes that turned to tighten and loosen the ropes attached to the arms.
We can see the wheels in the robot's chest.
The ropes were fed from the cogs in the chest, through the shoulder, and all the way down the arms. The result was that the turning of a gear produced a movement in the limb.
This would be the movement of the arm.
Put together, it produced a remarkably human result.
So what the robot can do is hug someone. So they reckoned it went up to people and hugged them.
The robot knight would have enthralled and entertained audiences wherever it went. But were there robots of the ancient world designed for more sinister and violent purposes? The ancient Greeks lived in an age of myth and legends, a world populated by gods and monsters. But in ancient texts, there are stories of another kind of being. This one, fully mechanical, stories of robot warriors. Homer, the most famous of ancient poets and writer of the tale of Troy, tells us of the god Hephaestus, the Greek god of smelting and metalwork.
He was the god of blacksmiths. He was the god of manufacturers. He was probably the first engineer ever on Earth.
Ancient texts say that Hephaestus lived high in the mountains of ancient Greece, and it was here he had his forge, where he smelted, beat, and created weapons, armor, and all things metal for the gods themselves. He was said to have produced countless ingenious mechanical devices, but intriguingly, Homer tells us that he also forged robots. They are described as having 3 legs, and could move and operate independently, as if they were living beasts, truly ancient androids.
Many of the historical references which we read now seem to be fantastical or even ridiculous in the claims, but one of the things that becomes more apparent the more one delves into it is that there may well be a grain of truth in some of these claims.
Of the advancement of the ancients, there remains one amazing invention that stands apart: a fully automated, self-propelled, ancient, programmable robot. The concept of the robot captures the human imagination. The idea of artificial pets, servants, warriors, or entertainers has enthralled human beings since records began. But is there evidence that the engineers of the ancient world were creating exactly this type of robot hundreds of years ago? Is it possible that there were artificial humans and animals in antiquity?
Throughout Chinese history, there have been stories of magical and fantastical machines that imitated human figures doing all sorts of activities. And the little gadget I've got here is actually of a serving girl, and the idea is that she will carry a glass of wine or drink to one of the guests at the dinner table.
The model performs a predetermined circuit of the table. This ancient android is powered by a coiled spring that is wound by the operator, exactly the same way we might wind a watch or clock today. This spring drives a large central cog. The central cog is connected to several other smaller cogs, each with their own function. It is the complicated and sophisticated interaction of these smaller cogs that produces the range of movements that the girl performs. An amazing achievement, hundreds of years before the complex machines of the European Industrial Revolution.
We should not be surprised that the ancients had robotic technology. They were not fools. They had mechanism, they had power, they had vision.
But the T-girl always repeats the same moves. To really see a self-propelled automatic programmable robot, we must turn to the most famous inventor in history, Leonardo da Vinci. Could Leonardo really have created a self-propelled, fully programmable robot? Remarkably, ancient texts tell us that 500 years ago, during an official ceremony, Leonardo presented a stunning gift to the King of France.
And we know for sure the King of France once witnessed the robot because it was a big celebration.
As onlookers watched in amazement, a lion walked with no wires or any help or interaction across the floor of the throne room.
And it came out to the King of France, opened his chest and gave him flowers, and everybody was stunned.
Today, using modern technological research, might it be possible to reconstruct Leonardo's lion? The challenge is monumental. Leonardo's blueprints of the robot lion have been lost to history.
After Leonardo died, his manuscripts got spread everywhere. Lots of them got lost, about 2/3 of them, and lots of others got cut up and put in different pages.
Alessandra Romanelli is a curator at the Leonardo Museum in the city. It is here that robotics historians have actually reconstructed Leonardo's robot knight, based on sketches made by Leonardo himself 500 years ago.
Leonardo dedicated himself to the project of an automaton, which is a humanoid machine.
Leonardo's android was designed based on an advanced knowledge of biomechanics.
And that's the science of how our bodies move. And so he was all the time thinking about, how could I make a machine that would be like a person?
Leonardo's robot was designed to replicate human movement through metal. Muscles, tendons, and ligaments were all first studied meticulously before their function was transformed into the robot's design.
Leonardo thought of the human body as a wonderful, perfect machine, and he tried to create a mechanical model that could reproduce the effect of human movements.
Cogs in the chest of the robot were attached to axles that were wound with rope. As the key cogs rotated, the rope became unwound or wound tighter. The rope was attached to the limbs, and as the rope was pulled or released, the limb moved.
It worked through the effect of tightening and loosening the ropes to simulate the traction and straining of limbs.
Beneath the knight's armor, we can see the gears and ropes that turned to tighten and loosen the ropes attached to the arms.
We can see the wheels in the robot's chest.
The ropes were fed from the cogs in the chest, through the shoulder, and all the way down the arms. The result was that the turning of a gear produced a movement in the limb.
This would be the movement of the arm.
Put together, it produced a remarkably human result.
So what the robot can do is hug someone. So they reckoned it went up to people and hugged them.
The robot knight would have enthralled and entertained audiences wherever it went. But were there robots of the ancient world designed for more sinister and violent purposes? The ancient Greeks lived in an age of myth and legends, a world populated by gods and monsters. But in ancient texts, there are stories of another kind of being. This one, fully mechanical, stories of robot warriors. Homer, the most famous of ancient poets and writer of the tale of Troy, tells us of the god Hephaestus, the Greek god of smelting and metalwork.
He was the god of blacksmiths. He was the god of manufacturers. He was probably the first engineer ever on Earth.
Ancient texts say that Hephaestus lived high in the mountains of ancient Greece. and it was here he had his forge, where he smelted, beat, and created weapons, armor, and all things metal for the gods themselves. He was said to have produced countless ingenious mechanical devices, but intriguingly, Homer tells us that he also forged robots. They are described as having 3 legs and could move and operate independently, as if they were living beasts, truly ancient androids.
Many of the historical references which we read now seem to be fantastical or even ridiculous in the claims, but one of the things that becomes more apparent the more one delves into it is that there may well be a grain of truth in some of these claims.
But is the idea of real working android soldiers in the ancient world as far-fetched as we might think? The Greek myths tell of ancient supersized humanoid warriors.
A good example here is the man-robot android called Talos, who was made as a gift to the king of Crete.
Legend has it that Zeus, the supreme deity and father of the gods, gave the robot giant to the king of Crete, an island off the coast of Greece. The elite warrior was charged with defending the island against all enemies.
Talos was claimed to be able to move, was claimed to be able to fight, and was given to help defend the place.
Talos would run around the island 3 times a day and pelt invaders with large boulders. Was this the world's first robot warrior?
If anything, it was robotic in shape, but probably consisted of a person in a suit.
Whether the Talos existed or not, it is evidence of a fascinating discovery. Even if the ancient Greeks did not yet have the technological capability to build human replicants, they had taken a massive conceptual step. They strived to create machines that behave like humans. They understood that with the right technology, human robots could one day be constructed.
Most of the cultures in the ancient world had mythological references to robotic machines or robotic people. And there seems to be a sort of human obsession with machines that mimic the human form or animal